This is the tutorial video for completing Schedule 2 Refugees Outside Canada.
You can download this form from the IRCC website, or you can also download it from within the Permanent Residence portal. Now, this form should be completed by the principal applicant and each family member of the principal applicant who is 18 years of age and older. They must complete their own copy of this form. Now, when completing this form, you want to make sure that you are referring to the Guide for Convention Refugees and Humanitarian Protected Persons Abroad, the IMM 6000 Instruction Guide. This guide gives you more information on what needs to be inserted into the different fields for the Schedule 2 PDF form. Now, when you open this guide, a quick way to navigate to the Schedule 2 information is to use your keyboard for your computer. If you're using a PC computer, you would click on Control F as in Frank. And when you do that, it will pop up a search window for you at the top right here. And as you can see, I have typed in Schedule 2, and it's searching the whole PDF form for that phrase. So I can use the down arrow to search for Schedule 2. Now here is where it shows me the fourth instance of that phrase is where the information is. And you'll see that it mentions this form is available in PDF only. And that's important to note because it is the one form for the refugees that is not typed in directly into the permanent residence portal online. So this means that you must complete this form offline from your computer by opening up a PDF reader and fill in the form using that application. So the first question is, are you the principal applicant? If you are, you're going to check mark the principal applicant here. If, however, you are one of the family members of the principal applicant that has been identified on their generic application, then you would select a family member. Then you would type in the person's name, starting with their family name or last name. Next, you will insert their given name or first name or middle name, and then you would type in their date of birth. The next section on the form should not be skipped over. You will need to make sure that you read the information that's on the form as well so you understand it. So here, it's explaining that you need to provide as much detail as possible when answering any of the questions. Scrolling down to Part A. This is where you're going to fill in information about the refugee claim that the person is making. So if we go back to the guide, you're going to scroll down and read what it says. So for parts A and B, read the questions carefully and provide as much information as possible. So include relevant details and don't exaggerate your responses. Tell the truth and provide everything that IRCC needs to know about your situation. So for question 1, you're going to describe the specific events which led you to flee your home country. So the person who is named on this particular Schedule A, the information that's inserted has to be in that person's own words. And they should also explain any actions that were taken against them or their family members or any other persons who were in a similar situation in their country or in the country of asylum. If the events were generalized, you need to describe how they affected you personally and what led you fearing for your safety. You should also indicate whether you sought protection from the authorities of your country, and if not, why didn't you? So for each incident that happened, specify the date that the events occurred. So when you explain the specific events, you want to explain them in chronological order. That means you're going to put things in order by date. And for question 2, again, you're going to respond describing in chronological order when exactly you and your family members left your home and what route you took. Did you use a flight? What were the flight numbers for the flight that you took? Did you drive in a vehicle? What was the date that you left? How did you pay for your travel? Now, if you did not travel together, explain the route that each family member took and the reasons why you didn't travel together. Include a copy of the passport stamp of when you entered the country, if it's available, and indicate whether someone planned your travel for you or helped you to leave or enter a country and how much you paid them. In section B for question 2, you will need to explain whether or not you're able to return to your home country, and if you can't, why can you not return? In many cases, it's also helpful to explain that you have attached country condition reports to support the claim for the reasons of why you cannot return to your home country. Because in many cases for refugees, other people in similar situations have had to flee their home country. And the UNHCR creates country condition reports which explain the situation in that country of origin. So in section B, you can, in addition, say, please see the country condition report that I have included, which supports my claim, my refugee claim. Scrolling down to item C for question number 2. You need to explain that since you arrived in the country where you're living now, have you returned to your country of origin even briefly? And if you did, how many times and under what circumstances? IRCC wants to know, do you have property or a business, or are you currently employed still in your country of origin? So those details help IRCC to determine whether or not you truly have a fear of persecution or fear the safety of your life in your country of origin. If you did return, you have to be truthful and explain how many times and under what circumstances. In some cases, IRCC will take into consideration compelling reasons for why you had to return to your country. And so that can be part of their decision making. So always be truthful for any questions that you're asked and the responses you're giving. Now for question 3, it's asking, in the country where you're living now, do you have the right to work, to go to school, or move freely? And are these rights available to you? And are you residing in a refugee camp or in an urban area? So write down everything that will help answer this question. So if you are working, where are you working? How do you get paid? Can your children go to school? Are you restricted in where you're able to go to within the country or not? Do you have the right to seek medical attention? Do you have the right to work? Do you have the right to education? If you're residing in a refugee camp, what is the name of that refugee camp? If you're not in a refugee camp, if you're in an urban area, explain how you obtained the ability to live in an urban area rather than a refugee camp, and how you are able to support paying for where you live in that urban area. For question B, IRCC wants to know how you have supported yourself and your family. So how do you get food to eat? How do you pay for the shelter where you live? That's where you're going to explain how you supported yourself and your family. If you received food and income from a NGO, a non-government organization in that country of asylum, then explain that. Now, question number 4, if there's any other information that you think might be relevant to your case, please attach a separate page. And I suggest that you insert the country condition report for the country of origin as well as the country of asylum where you are located. And you can find those country condition reports from the UNHCR website. So I suggest that you open up your web browser, for example, Google, and type in country condition reports, UNHCR. So click on the link here, and then you can find the particular country information. So scrolling down, you can see country names here. And there's additional country profiles that you can also access from Amnesty International, Freedom House, Human Rights Watch, and the U.S. Department of State. Feel free to include those country condition reports as well. So in Part B, you are going to indicate whether you have previously applied for resettlement to Canada. If you did apply, explain when and where you applied and what the result was of your application. And if your application was refused, explain how your circumstances have changed since you applied previously. For question 6, you're going to answer, have you ever been refused refugee status by any country, including the country where you're living now? And be truthful about this, because having been refused refugee status is not necessarily a bad thing. It can actually strengthen your claim that you don't have a durable solution anywhere because you've been refused refugee status by a particular country. And item B, other than this application, do you currently have a refugee status application in process in any other country, including the country where you are currently living? So if you have applied to UNHCR for protection in one country, and then you left that country and moved to a different country, and then applied with UNHCR again, you need to explain that you had applications for protection in those two countries. And of course, provide as much detail as possible, including the dates, the names of the places, and a description of the circumstances for those situations. And question C, have you ever applied for refugee status with United Nations, UNHCR, in any country? If you have, then provide a copy of all documentation you received from the UNHCR and or the country of asylum where you have made any refugee claim. And if it's applicable and available, always include a copy of any refusal letters that you received from either UNHCR or from the country of asylum where you sought a refugee claim. And for Part D of question 6, you need to indicate whether you currently have an application for immigration in process to any country. Explain what the application is and which country, and whether it is under a family reunification category or for economic reasons. For question 7, you want to explain the immigration status for yourself and each of your family members in your current country of residence. So for example, do you have citizenship, permanent residence, a visitor visa? Are you considered a refugee? Do you have refugee status? Or do you not have a status at all for the country you're currently residing? In particular, if you have a temporary residency, then you need to explain that as well. And provide the documentation you've been provided for the status that you were granted in the current country of residence where you are. For section B of question 7, indicate your level of being able to read, write, or speak or understand English or French. If you can speak any other languages, then you would need to indicate which languages they are and how well you can speak those languages. For section D, you want to give examples of any work experience, skills, or personal qualities that would assist you in successfully settling in Canada. Responding to this question is pretty important. IRCC wants to know that you have the ability to integrate into Canadian culture. So if you have work experience and skills that will help you to obtain employment, to get a job here in Canada, you want to explain what that work experience is and the skills that you have. If, however, you don't have specific work experience or skills, you may have personal qualities that you can talk about that demonstrate that you could successfully settle in Canada. So are you a person who doesn't give up? Are you someone who perseveres? That would be a personal quality that would explain to Canada that you would keep doing whatever it takes to be successful when you come to Canada. So give examples of what your character is like, that you do whatever it takes to ensure that you can provide for your family. And you might be able to use your circumstances that you're in right now in the country of asylum as an example of how you provided for your family and how you persevered and didn't give up. Now, part C, this is where the additional family information is to be inserted. Now, whenever you insert somebody's information on this form, it should match the information that you have provided for them on the generic application if they are your immediate family. The guide tells you you must list all family members on this form, even if they're not accompanying you to Canada, or if they're deceased or presumed deceased, or if you don't know where they are. So under question 8, family information, you're going to provide the information for yourself, your spouse, as well as your mother and father.
When entering in the names of your family members, be sure that you include not only the names in English, but also in your native language.
Question 9 is where you're going to insert the information for your children, including if there are any children who have been adopted, stepchildren. So if you are not the biological parent, but they are the child of your spouse, you would need to include their information here. You may have children that don't live with you, that are from a different marriage, that may never come to Canada with you. You still need to insert their information here. Now, when it comes to listing your children, this is where you will list all of your children, not just the dependents who you've included on the generic application. So you may have children who are married and they can't be included on the generic application. You would insert their information here. Enter their name, their relationship, their date of birth, where they are, and their marital status, their present address, as well as their email address. Now keep in mind, you should have separate, different email addresses for each person. If they don't have an email address, you can write down not applicable, but then in a letter of explanation, you should explain why you can't provide their email address. Question 10 is where you're going to fill in information about brothers and sisters. So for example, if the Schedule A being filled out is for the spouse of the principal applicant, this is where that spouse's brothers and sisters will be filled out. For question 11, that's where you're going to insert information about any relatives who are already in Canada.
Part D is the consent and declaration. Make sure that the person who this form belongs to understands what they're signing and how their information is going to be used.
Question 13, you need to indicate whether you have received assistance in completing the application forms and the name of the individual or organization that assisted you. You also need to explain whether or not you paid the person or organization that assisted you. And under section 14, it's very important to ensure that the person signs and dates the form. Now, you can sign this form by typing in your name, and that can represent your signature. Or you could sign it in pen. If it is not signed and dated, the application will be returned.
And scrolling to the bottom of the form, make sure that you read and understand the information that is provided here.